Judgment Day stand tall on this week's edition of WWE Raw, as it was Finn Balor and company standing over Damian Priest and Rhea Ripley to finish off this particular episode because they were the ones that, like we've been saying, really needed to continue to gain some momentum heading towards those two big singles matches at Bad Blood, Finn Balor versus Damian Priest, Liv Morgan versus Rhea Ripley. We know those two matches are going to take place, and they're perfect for Bad Blood, given the theme of that particular PLE, and there was a lot with Judgment Day on this show. You had a lot of sort of the, character motivation type stuff that really played out here, including a couple key moments that we'll talk about. But, you even had Finn Balor and JD McDonough defending their tag team championships, right, against the New Day, which we'll also talk about in this episode. But you kind of look at just the way things played out. Yes, you kind of had a feeling that Damian Priest was going to beat Dominic Mysterio, but you knew it was bigger than that. You knew it really didn't matter about that particular outcome. It was going to be what could Judgment Day do to regain the upper hand in this rivalry. And as I've continued to say, I just think that has been very important to be able to build that because, they are not on the level of Damian Priest and Rhea Ripley. And, some people may argue against that, but when you really look at it, when you're losing two members like that have such a high profile and have built up, themselves into these main event top stars like Priest and Rhea have, it's a challenge. And I think that you have to continue to give this group that extra something that makes them feel like they are a legitimate threat to what Priest and Rhea are trying to accomplish now on their own. And I think that this was, kind of a step in the right direction to be able to do that. They sort of turned up the aggression, ruthless aggression, I guess you could say, for Judgment Day to finish the show, where you had, Liv kind of taking out Rhea. You had them, Finn kind of taking it up a notch against Damian Priest. And so, like I said, I think using the numbers advantage to kind of continue to push that the Judgment Day is a force to be reckoned with is a smart move, because remember, too, like the numbers advantage exists, but it also exists while knowing that you have Jey Uso. That is someone who continues to get involved in this. Ilya Dragunov was sort of teased to continue to kind of now play a role somehow in this moving forward, although he didn't come out at the end like Jey did before Jey took a spear from Bron Breakker. But you had the Judgment Day sort of warning Dragunov to choose his friends wisely based on, again, what they're trying to achieve by taking out Damian Priest and Rhea Ripley and Jey Uso and so forth. So I like the fact that they add kind of Dragunov into this mix a little bit. It'll be interesting to see what comes of that, because he did not come out to help any of the three at the end there. But I think that's going to be something that's kind of fascinating. But you guys know I talk about that a lot. To me, that's one of the strengths of this Triple H era when it comes to WWE, is the fact that you have so many different people who are kind of intertwined in different storylines. It's not just people who exist in their own bubble on the show and you never see them again. Yes, some of that happens naturally because some people aren't going to be involved in 3 or 4 different storylines. But when it comes to the top stars, you want to have them, interacting with more than just the people that they are directly feuding with, right? And that's where, again, you have a Jey kind of standing on the outside looking in when it comes to this rivalry. He's trying to help, his friends and Damian Priest and Rhea Ripley. And so it's those kind of things that I really enjoy about the Judgment Day storyline in general, and how they're pushing this is because you have them interacting with all these different people, even though you know that the biggest part of it is their hatred of Damian Priest and Rhea Ripley. And we did kind of get a little bit of that on this episode in terms of, you finally have Finn Balor, and you can see Rhea's face here on this visual. So you sort of finally have Finn Balor make the big reveal, right? And we knew this, right? We talked about all the different hints that they were dropping and everything when it came to, was Dominic going to turn on Rhea? And we had that debate for a couple weeks. Then it became pretty clear that Dominic had to turn on Rhea and join Liv. That just made the most sense. But you did have Balor, reveal here, hey, Rhea, I'm the one who pushed Dominic in the direction of choosing Liv. And, Balor putting more of the blame now on Rhea, just like he's done with Damian Priest, for breaking up their family, right? That's what this has all been about. And so you have Balor playing the dastardly heel here, blaming, the newly, crowned baby faces. And I thought it would just work pretty well to have Balor finally just come out and say it, right? Even though we knew that was the case. But he was the one pulling the strings, making sure that Dominic chose Liv Morgan because they had to, for the family, because of what Priest and Rhea did to their family. They broke them up. They're the reason everybody had to split. And so, you have Rhea coming back saying, hey, this wasn't, she was supporting the family and all this other stuff. So I like the interaction between these two backstage because, like we said, too, that's where when you have stuff like this, especially this storyline, it's not just the whole group versus the other group. Like, you have to have the individuals sort of, also having their interactions. And like this one, right? Balor and Rhea, who were so connected for however long with the Judgment Day, like they had to kind of have this, sort of thing where you're obviously not going to have a match between the two, but you need to have something between them to kind of, reveal what each is thinking about everything that's happened here, and you got that in this backstage segment. So thought it was important to bring that out. You kind of have Liv do the same thing to Damian Priest, and Priest basically saying that Liv was the one with the balls in the group. And so, I think those kind of things are important too to kind of add to the storyline, and it helps because then you have everyone kind of having different motivations and thoughts on the other people, within the other group. And so I always enjoy that. But, again, that was kind of the theme here, was that you had, Judgment Day feeling pretty confident on this show. The tag team champions retain their belts. Even though Dominic loses to Damian Priest, you still have a Judgment Day walking out of Raw feeling really good about where they're at, a couple weeks away now from Bad Blood. So, I think that's going to set up for a very exciting sort of show at Bad Blood for those two matches in particular on it, because like I said, I think we're gonna have that discussion when we make our predictions. But I think there's a couple different ways you can go with how this plays out, and we'll talk about maybe who needs this the most when it comes to those particular singles matches. But Judgment Day, again, feeling pretty good about themselves exiting this edition of Raw. But speaking of that, Jey Uso, as we said, was involved here with the Judgment Day as well. And so we'll go ahead and knock that out of the way, and something else that involved the Judgment Day. But, Jey comes out to make the save for Priest and Rhea at the end, but he gets speared, out of his shorts by Bron Breakker. And, they had the promo exchange on this episode, and it was officially revealed that we're going to get this match next week on Raw, not going to happen at Bad Blood. We had talked about it as though, all right, it would make sense to put this on Bad Blood because Jey's kind of been out of the rotation on the PLEs in terms of matches, and we're like, maybe they get Jey back into the rotation here a little bit because it's been a little while. It feels like in terms of Jey having a presence on one of these PLEs, but now you are going to do this match next week on Raw because I'm sure WWE wants to cap Bad Blood. Do we have 5 matches for Bad Blood? If we do, then we're probably done because we know that's kind of the magic number these days when it comes to these PLEs, kind of that level. But so we're going to get it on Raw, and I think it's good to have this on Raw because I think that opens up a lot more possibilities in terms of what they do story-wise. You guys know I did a YouTube short yesterday out of one of our discussions we had last week about, could this be where Judgment Day somehow cost Jey Uso the Intercontinental Championship opportunity? That's something that could come into play because we've seen Jey, again, kind of stick his nose in their business now, and, you kind of you see what can happen if you do that, and we saw that on this particular show. So, I like the fact that, Breakker's bringing up the point here to say, Jey, you've been in WWE for 14 years or whatever it is, and I've accomplished more in terms of like singles championships in 6 months than you have in 14 years. Well, that was a great line because it's true, right? And so that gives Breakker that cockiness going into this match where, come on, this is Jey Uso. Yeah, he's had success in the bloodline. He's won tag team championships and all this, but this is Jey Uso by himself. He can't do this. He hasn't done it in 14 years. He's not going to be a singles champion, all that stuff. So I really like the way they played that up, and Jey now has another opportunity to prove himself. And I think, at some point, that is going to be an interesting question to ask. What if Jey does come up short here, right? And maybe that plays into what we get moving forward. If Jey loses another opportunity, he's had shots at the world title. If he loses this opportunity, the Intercontinental Championship, which I can't imagine they're doing a title switch next week on Raw. They could surprise us all, but you would think Breakker's reign's probably going to continue. But I think that's something they can play into, what Jey does moving forward. If he comes up short again in singles-wise, and hey, it's like, maybe you have Sami Zayn give him the same kind of pep talk, right? Where when Zayn lost his Intercontinental Championship to Breakker, you kind of had Jey, trying to talk Sami up a bit, get that confidence back for him. And now maybe it's the same scenario where Sami has to do the same for Jey, although Sami's going to have a bigger opportunity, we know, against Gunther, who we'll talk about in a second. But yeah, I think that's going to be kind of fascinating to see what they do next week, and that's where, like I said, having the Judgment Day involved would make sense. but also, finding another way to kind of make this even more interesting, whether it's, again, Breakker just straight up beating Jey, or how do you go about doing it? I'm curious what you guys think. Let me know your predictions on how that's going to play out next week between Jey and Bron Breakker for the Intercontinental Championship. But we'll go ahead and quickly do the New Day stuff because, again, everybody, it all connects here. As we said, New Day lost that match to Judgment Day, and, they started to continue to build up now the tension between Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods. And we know this is something that they've had in motion for a while now because it all kind of came into play with the stuff that they had, the rivalry with the Final Testament and all that. And then you had the Odyssey Jones stuff, which, as we know now, Odyssey Jones not on the roster anymore. You guys have probably read all of the various rumors as to why that is. But now you just kind of keep going with this tension. And this was the time we finally saw it sort of escalate to the point to where, it's kind of a shouting match, right? Where Xavier was just going off on Kofi, talking about how did LWO know that we were having a match or when we were coming out, whatever that he said specifically. Because LWO got involved to kind of fight off the Judgment Day there. So, yeah, like this is starting to boil over, and I'm very interested still to see where this goes because, like we said, we know there was an initial direction, with adding Odyssey Jones to the mix. Now that he's not in the mix, now where do they go from here? It's clear they're kind of still, teasing the split, maybe more so than ever now after this particular show. But what's next? Like, where do they go from here with everything else? I'm very curious to see what happens with the New Day, with Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods. But going beyond that, again, there was so much on the show. I'll be honest, I thought this was one of the better editions of Raw we've had in a good bit. I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was a little bit, hey, it's 3 hours. It's always 3 hours. Well, it won't be coming up soon. It'll be back to 2 hours for several months, which I think will be very enjoyable. But still, I thought this one, flowed pretty well. And, one of the other things that I think was a standout, we talked about Sami Zayn a minute ago. He had the segment with Ludwig Kaiser. And, Gunther eventually would come out and still, they have kind of the heels having this master plan to where all of a sudden you think Kaiser's about to, spill his mind on Gunther and let out all this frustration and anything else he's had towards his friend Gunther over the years. But then he just attacks Sami Zayn. You have Gunther laughing, as though this was their plan. And so they kind of won up a little bit on that, even though Gunther exits afterwards and Sami's able to get the upper hand on Kaiser. But I thought this was very important because you guys know we talked about this before. You list off all the potential challengers for Gunther at some point during his world title reign, right? And we've mentioned the obvious ones, whether it's, it's Sami and again, maybe something with John Cena during Cena's retirement tour next year. We mentioned Punk. We mentioned Rollins, like McIntyre. You can go down the list of the obvious choices. But one that really is very intriguing, and that is Kaiser, as potentially doing that match at some point in the future. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon necessarily, but they planted the seed here where Sami is basically calling out the idea that Kaiser has broken, he's broken up Imperium, like Giovanni Vinci's over here getting beat by Apollo Crews in 3 seconds on SmackDown now. And you've got Kaiser, who is all alone, and he did that for a reason. And Kaiser continues to kind of speak for Gunther and all this other stuff. But Sami's kind of pushing the idea that, hey, you know why you did all this. You're doing this to prove yourself. You're not doing this for Gunther. You're not doing this for, I want you to kind of speak for yourself. And you kind of had Sami, sort of doing that thing, right? Where he's kind of trying to get in Kaiser's head a little bit. We've talked about Sami kind of playing the mind games with Gunther, but now kind of pushing the idea that, hey, we're at least putting it out there. And even though we've all thought this, they're explicitly, putting it right in front of us as to say, hey, we want to plant that seed in your mind that, yeah, Kaiser is someone who is on the way up, right? He's on the up here. And he is someone who may, at some point, think about, betraying his friend Gunther because he has what he wants. He has that World Heavyweight Championship. And so I like the fact that they're introducing this now because it's so obvious to where you kind of have to bring it up. Because Kaiser is clearly seen as one of the future stars here. And I think having Sami bring it up and acknowledge that gives you an idea that, hey, we may not be too far away from having Kaiser and Gunther maybe have a match at some point. I would still fully expect we're months or further down the road from that. But I like the fact that they don't insult our intelligence as to, we know this is something that could happen. And we also know that Kaiser is now, broken away from the Imperium tag team for a reason. And it's because they see a lot more in what he can be, and I'm excited about it because we're going to get Sami versus Kaiser next week. Just, a logical next step towards getting to, Gunther and Sami for the World Championship. So, yeah, I like this, and I think they're going to have a great match next week. And I think this was one of those kind of breakthrough moments for Kaiser that kind of elevates him a little bit to make you think a little bit more about his role now because of, yes, he's standing beside Gunther. He's Gunther's hype man, if you will, but there's more he wants to achieve, and I think that was kind of a nice play there to add that in. So we know we're going to eventually get to the World Heavyweight Championship match between Gunther and Sami, but I like the fact that we're adding Kaiser into the mix here because I've said it. I think he is he's a future top star, and his mannerisms, the personality, the in-ring stuff, he's really good. So yeah, excited about kind of the direction they're going with on that. All right, we also had CM Punk, who led off the show as Punk kind of, gave his response to being now announced for this Hell in a Cell match against Drew McIntyre. And, this was about as serious of a CM Punk promo as we've had in a while because this was, not like CM Punk playing with the crowd, jokes. There was none of that. Like, it was absolute serious CM Punk making it very clear that this man is willing to die inside of Hell in a Cell. Like, that was his message, is that he will give everything he has, and I like the fact that he brings up, my sister asked me not to do this match. My wife, AJ Lee, he didn't mention her name, but we know who it is, asked me not to do this match. But I am going to do it anyways, and, he's talking about the numbers and how many matches he has left in him. He has more than we think, but when asked, how many Hell in a Cell matches do you have left in him? 0. He doesn't have any left, but he's going to do it because he has to finish this with Drew McIntyre. And again, he's willing to lose it all in order to finish it with Drew McIntyre. Kind of questioning, is Drew willing to do the same? And we will get McIntyre's response next week on Raw to that. But they are setting this up to where these two guys are going to have to beat the absolute hell out of each other inside Hell in a Cell. And I think we're going to get kind of that long-awaited sort of the kind of match you expect these two to have. Again, it sort of has escalated each time, right? You kind of had the slower, Seth Rollins stuff involved at SummerSlam. You take it up a notch with the strap match, gets a little bit more violent, but it's still, as Punk said, you're just touching 4 corners. You're not kind of establishing yourself, as the winner of the feud. But now it's really about who survives Hell in a Cell. And that's the only way to finish this thing. The feud of the year in WWE, in my eyes, and I think they're going to deliver something very special at Bad Blood. I just think it's going to happen. So that match, I think, is going to be worth the wait between CM Punk and Drew McIntyre, Hell in a Cell, and we'll find out what McIntyre has to say next week on Raw. But speaking of just unbelievable moments on Raw, and then there was Bronson Reed and Braun Strowman, which never fails to deliver a spectacular moment on Raw. And we kept saying, look, they have to one-up themselves each time. And immediately you could tell they were going to do that here because you had the ropes break right off the bat. You had, Bronson Reed launching someone lawn dart style like Rey Mysterio on the WCW trailer in the parking lot back in what was that, 97, 98. You had Braun Strowman spearing Reed through the barricade. You had it spilling into the back where you got Strowman tipping over a golf cart. You've got Reed hitting the tsunami onto Strowman on a table. You have Strowman putting Reed through a wall. Yes, like this, if you didn't watch Raw, these are all things that happen in this one segment on this week's edition of Raw. And so, I probably forgot something. There's probably something in that sequence that I forgot. But I mean, it's just, remember, what was it? It was years ago, when WWE was really all in on Braun Strowman. And it was like each episode of Raw, it was trying to come up with the next sort of wild idea, that next sort of viral type moment, I guess you could say, where Strowman was just doing these superhuman things, showing off his power and his strength and all that. It's kind of the same formula they're using here. They're just doing it with someone else, to where Reed is kind of the person who is kind of right there with him and is able to do all these just wild things. And so I'm all in for this. Like, again, everyone for me, like wrestling is all about variety. And when you have something like this that goes along with the other serious stuff that we've talked about, and it's not to say this isn't serious, but it's just presented in such a different way to where you are playing to the strengths. And any good booker, any person throughout professional wrestling history can tell you, you just have to play to the strengths of your talent. And these guys, their strength is their power and then just their presence, right? Braun Strowman and Bronson Reed, like they just have a presence. Like these are two badass dudes that are huge and can kick ass. Like that's kind of what it comes down to. So let them do that. And now they're doing it together, and I love this right now between these two. And it's only going to lead to bigger things, I think, specifically for Bronson Reed. We know that Seth Rollins feud is out there when Rollins eventually comes back. Reed listed off all the people that he's taken out, and I think he's going to be the person, that eventually wins this feud, however that is. At this point, winning the feud, I'm scared to know what that could mean. But I think, like that's kind of where we are with these two, but I continue to love this stuff with Bronson Reed. So, pretty fantastic work there. Definitely watch that segment. If you didn't watch anything else on Raw, watch that because it will be worth, the 3 or 4 minutes, however long it was, with those two just, throwing out finishers back and forth. Like these are not traditional wrestling finishers, but like just anything they can find to take out the other. So pretty remarkable stuff there. Meanwhile, the other stuff on Raw, you did have, I thought, a really good match between Bianca Belair and IYO Sky. IYO's able to, get the, small package or roll-up pinfall victory there in that one. So that's going to lead to something more. She's pinning one half of the tag team champions. We know, again, what that's probably going to lead to. And she, of course, took the place of Kairi Sane, who was ruled out with an injury. I think that was a very good match. I definitely recommend that as well between those two. I feel like they've always had good chemistry, right? And it all runs together for me. I'm trying to think of like the most recent matches they've had. But, I thought this was a really good match. It really turned into something, again, it's definitely worth watching if you didn't get a chance to check that out. So we know there's going to be more coming with that. Sheamus and Pete Dunne. Pete Dunne steals the win against Sheamus, using the cricket bats. So Sheamus trying to get the referee's attention on the shillelagh when he should have been focusing on the cricket bat, which takes out Sheamus. So that was notable. Natalya, beat Zoe Stark. So that's going to continue the stuff there with them. You had a couple, I think, noteworthy promo packages here, and it's from the two sides that have been, kind of combined at the hip here for the past month or whatever it's been. American Made, Chad Gable, they're out on the, whatever they're riding there. Was it the Hummer or something? And you've got them out there and get this. The stuff that Gable's doing, as I say, continues to remind me of like, heel Kurt Angle, and he definitely is playing that up here. They're finished with the Wyatt Six, and they're really ready to, continue on now, and so they're still playing to Gable's kind of comedic side, I think, a little bit, the personality, and you're kind of seeing some of that come out with the Creed brothers as well. But I'm at least curious to see where they go now with American Made. Now that, again, it seems like they're pretty much done with the Wyatt Six. And you did have the Wyatt Six also in a very short segment here, using one of the video packages, bringing up the QR code. If you haven't looked into the QR code, from what I can tell, it does lead to something that may tease that the Wyatt Six are waiting for that other member. And it sounds like one of those teases could be for none other than Alexa Bliss. So we've always talked about that from the beginning as a possibility for this group. And I know I've seen some people talking about maybe that QR code leading to something that hints at the idea that they're waiting for her or something like that. You guys can fill me in more on the comments. I'm not always the best with kind of knowing every little tiny detail when it comes to these things, but that is something that I think would be kind of interesting to see if we do eventually get there with that. So there you go. That was this week's edition of Raw. Like I said, there's a lot packed into the show. It's a little bit of a longer episode than we normally do for these reaction videos, but I thought there was a lot of noteworthy stuff worth talking about, and I may have still forgotten something as I'm looking down my notes here. I think I hit on most of the top stuff. There may have been a couple things in there that I missed, but yeah, I thought this was, again, a very productive show and gets us headed towards Bad Blood and everything else on Raw as we move forward here on this show. So, again, guys, always appreciate you watching. Let me know your thoughts on this week's edition of Raw. Be sure to subscribe button, hit the like button on your way out. And, always appreciate your feedback. You can tell my voice a little bit better now, so hopefully we can get a few more videos coming for you this week. Got an interesting video coming on the Bloodline, which I always enjoy those, you guys know. But, the Dream Team of Roman Reigns and Cody Rhodes on SmackDown, so we'll talk about that too as well. But, again, appreciate you guys watching. Let me know your thoughts on this week's edition of WWE Raw.